Good evening, and thank you all for attending today's webinar. Quite an interesting conversation and interesting panelists as well, because procurement, especially within the public sector, has been known to have a few pain points. But on that note as well, for governments to carry out their day-to-day functions, procurement or their ability to purchase goods and services is a critical component. It is both a service function and a strategic policy tool that can help achieve a broad range of social and economic welfare objectives. It cuts across all areas of public administration and builds on cooperation amongst multiple public and private stakeholders. However, for governments, as the major purchasers in every market, innovation can thrive as well, but this needs collaboration sometimes with the public sector. So this evening, it gives me great pleasure to be able to introduce our panelists today. We have Andrew Ashene, who's a procurement specialist and works in one of the public institutions, and I will ask him to introduce himself at the time. We also have Alex Musungu, who is a senior within the profession, and he will have an opportunity to introduce himself as well. And lastly, Chris Wasike, who will be speaking to us from the point of view of having worked both in the private sector, running his own consultancy. What are some of the things that he's seeing within the supply chain space, and how can we innovate within the law? So my name is Rose Sang. I will be moderating the session, but before we can invite the speakers, allow me to invite Ben, who is the founder and CEO of House of Procurement, to give us his opening remarks, and then we can start. So Ben, karibu sana.
Thank you, Rose, and thank everyone for attending this session again. I think over half of you are consistent attendees and participants. I hope that from all the webinars we've done, you get something that is relevant, applicable, and impactful in what you do, be it business, be it at work. For a long time, we have been seen as a private sector business, but we do quite a bit with the public sector. So a few people in the public sector we engage with a lot. And one of those difficult conversations in the public sector is how to bring procurement just not as a back office, but as a strategic function in the organization. In fact, in some countries, they have ministers for procurement. In the UK, in Canada, in Ghana, they have ministers of procurement, and I personally put this proposal forward. However, we probably need to show value before we are considered for cabinet secretary or even permanent secretary or principal secretary role. So for me, how I see public procurement, and by extension private procurement, is as an instrument that government can use to distribute and protect the wealth of the nations. So if you want to impact the youth, if you want to impact the vulnerable, if you want to improve on services, if you want to put income in the hands of many people, like we've seen the budget talking about SMEs, there's no other tool the government will use but procurement. And this also applies in the private sector, just to contextualize. So any income that the government gets, such as taxes, or even the natural resources, if you have oil or minerals, the single tool that you have as a government to impact your community and your society is procurement. That is the power that we have. And that is something that we need to bring forth in everything we do, and be aware that we have a power to change lives and livelihoods or destroy them completely, as is probably the case in most of Africa. So today, Andrew, Alex, and Chris will let us know what are the possibilities, and when we get out of here, we can do one thing to impact and create that impression that we are valuable and strategic. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rose.
Thank you, Ben, for your opening remarks. So allow me to invite Andrew Ashene, who will be speaking to us around, is it possible to innovate within the public sector, but also how then do we measure the performance of suppliers so that we continue to generate and receive value as we go along. So karibu sana, Andrew.
Andrew, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, the guests who are here, and my fellow panelists, and our hosts. My name is Ashene. I work in the public sector. I have over 10 years experience in supply chain. Alex are my seniors, and I know quite a number of seniors who are in this forum. I want to welcome even our other guests from across the country and outside the country. So I've had an experience in a manufacturing firm that does both production, planning, and up to the sales and marketing. I've also had an experience in working with an original equipment manufacturer, an OEM. I've also worked with in the financial industry, that is the banks and all that. So when I moved to the public sector, it was quite an interesting journey because the law had just come into effect, that is the PPAD 2015. So it was quite an exciting experience to be able to see how the private sector works and how the public sector works. Main point of our reference is the law. And the law is just in black and white. What I say is, from what I've experienced as practitioners, we read the English in the law, but we have the legal people, the legal department to actually interpret it for us. But all the same, if you apply the law the English way, it still works. It works perfectly well. So for this session, I totally understood we are looking at public procurement, the innovations in public procurement as it is now in Kenya. And the law is quite extensive, but all the same, I picked out two aspects. I'll try and look at, largely when people look at, they like to look at procurement other than looking at supply chain. So largely I'm going to touch on procurement and also mention on logistics, because when you look at how the public law in Kenya is defined, it's Public Procurement and Disposal Act. So you can't apply it only one direction. So I'm going to look at, I wish I could, let me just allow me to share with you my presentation so that maybe it will be very easy for you to follow with me. Just a moment. Rose, I need to share my screen. Okay. Are you with me? Everybody's with me? I hope so. So, strategic innovation in public procurement law. The two main areas that have really are wanting in public procurement is something that we call supplier performance management. They are repeat people who come, still do not perform, and this is public knowledge. So you wonder what is not happening. So the main area I'm going to look at is the innovation that you can have in the public procurement is on supplier performance management. For those in public sector, we use standard tender documents. These documents are kind of already predefined. However, there's an opportunity in procurement, in supplier performance management. When you look at the law has already defined for us procurement methods, and there's one method that we totally shy out, that is reverse auction. So I'm also going to talk about the reverse auction. For those in the private sector and fast-moving consumer goods, I'm sure you have your leverage items, and those leverage items you use them for reverse auction. And then there's the aspect of procurement of consultancy services. There's a tendency in public procurement for us to go for open tender, restricted tender, but then very few people dare venture through the avenue that procurement of consultancy services is given, and it's totally defined in law. Then in inventory management, there's some innovation around inventory control, assets and stores management, and distribution. So I'll quote the law because this is what really directs us. And I'm just going to get snippets of it. There's a part 4 of the Public Procurement and Disposal Act, and our guest from Tanzania, you will allow us, but I'm sure our acts are not so different because I'm presenting in the context of the webinar. There's a power to ensure compliance. There's a part 4 of the Public Procurement and Disposal Act. And this act says it gives us an avenue to debar, to stop somebody from participating. These people who are perennially winning because they know how to scatter around, but then when it comes to delivery, they don't work. So part of it is Section 41 says the board. So we are governed, there are bodies in the law. There's a Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, and there's a review board. So we can present, if somebody is not performing, you can present for debarment. But if you check on the list on the regulatory or PPRA website and records, the aspect of debarment is really not executed as much because we lack a framework of how to start this process. Because when you want to debar, it means to stop this person from participating. And remember, the law has also given the framework. It says in Section 41.4, it says a debarment under this section will last for more than 3 years, which means if you successfully get to debar as a vendor who's consistently not performing, you can imagine how many other procuring entities will be saved from having to deal with such a non-performer. But we need to put them through a process where they'll get the confidence and say, okay, fine, I deserve to be debarred. Because even the debarment process is quite elaborate and it's defined in law and it's quite elaborate. However, when I read the part of the law, 41C, it says, when do you start this debarment process? It says, once they have breached a contract for procurement to a public entity, and its further states, including poor performance, and that's what I'm trying to say. So the challenge in the public setup is, how do you define poor performance? From a lot of public procurement that we do is quite mechanical. We just go through the motions and we want to get this deal done because we already know the budgets. However, I see an opportunity of adding the aspect of performance. So the question that we are asking is, how does one objectively demonstrate this aspect of poor performance? The law is very interesting. It really defines what a procurement contract is. So in this sense, I mean that we start looking at performance when you've already signed the contract. However, the law, the Kenyan law is worded in such a way that it says the tender document shall be the basis of all procurement contracts. So we have standard tender documents that are already predefined. But remember, this is the basis of our contract, our procurement contract. So what opportunity do we have as a procuring entity, and especially those in public procurement, introduce an item of supplier performance? And when you look at the basis of the procurement, it tells you at minimum you must have a contract agreement form, tender form, a bill of quantities, requirements, technical specifications, and then there's the aspect of general conditions of contract and special conditions of contract. So I see an opportunity at the aspect of general conditions of contract. Remember, the way the law has defined it said this is the minimums. So it doesn't mean that you have to have only these items. If you are a practitioner in public procurement, yes, you must have a contract agreement form as defined, a tender form. However, I see an opportunity under general conditions of contract. Why don't you introduce a supplier performance review scheme there? A supplier performance review scheme, not to be part of the evaluation, but it will just point out to you that when you get into contract, we are going to evaluate your performance of the contract. So this is an innovation that I think we can put into these standard tender documents. For example, I've given just a sample there where we look at Kikao. Now, this is a public entity called Kikao, and clearly defines in a clause in the general conditions of contract saying I'll use a supplier performance rating scheme to measure your performance and obligations of the contract, and the scheme will be updated periodically. We shall consider the overall performance and request either party. So, and then I give some sample of the definition of what I mean by being very good, good, fair, and poor, such that it is a structured way of saying when you perform and you score over 75, I'll give you a green, and whichever banding that you look, so that it's documented and it is a way of telling you that once you become the successful bidder, then this will apply. What happens is right now, a lot of things end at the tender. And once the tender is done and the award is done, now the contract kicks in. And the contract kicks in with its terms and conditions. However, there's the soft issue of managing the performance that is not there. And the beauty about this supplier performance kind of framework, it will be able to help you rank. And if you are a practitioner in a procuring entity, it can form part of the record, a documented record in terms of now, let's say in public procurement is the accounting officer, director general actually by law, they call them the accounting officer. You might find they're called CEOs. Is the accounting officer. Report to the accounting officer in your monthly, maybe internal document, and say, this is how these suppliers are performing. So in my sample Kikao, we are saying, if it's KP1, this is a supplier who's operating over 70, getting over 75, you give him preferred status. KP2 and 3, you try work with the supplier and improve the supplier, and KP4, you abandon the supplier. This is a structured way that can enable you now start putting a case for debarment of somebody who is at KP4, that is a poor performer. The other thing about this supplier performance management, and you bring it on board, especially for public entities, this is just an example of maybe an extract of my report that I'm giving my every month to my accounting officer, showing the performance of Hornbill, Honduran, or Pilila agencies. In the process, I am building a case for either exercising a type of procurement, like for example, we have different procuring methods. We have the one for well-known suppliers. So you see, consistently, I have a record to show this supplier is working well. There's a provision for direct procurement. This can also help boost a case for a direct procurement, especially when you want to buy something. It's a record that most procuring entities lack. So there's normally a general narrative on the floor that says, this supplier is not performing. You need to blackmail him. But now when you want to start and blacklisting him, which remember as a procuring entity, a public procuring, you can't. You can only make a recommendation so that the debarment process is initiated at the board, but you need this kind of data. I have an example of a performance rating tool, which on your left side has like, I say this is an evaluation form. And when I'm publishing my tender document, I have it as an extra, and you can see the disclaimer in saying the form is just to condition you, because I think that's one of the big aspects that we need to condition our partners who are coming to contract with us. We tell them, you're not to fill this form, but we'll evaluate your performance during the contract period. Remember, it is now part of the tender document, so which means it can form the basis of my contract. If you go to the standard tender document, you will not get this, but this is an innovation that you can introduce at the tail end of your standard tender documents, so that they know when we are getting into these relationship, we are going to be evaluated. There's no, when you look at the template, the evaluation form that is there, you can look at there's a cost of the service, delivery, demand, quality, and there's a rating guidelines. Most important, when you're applying this tool, you're sitting down with the supplier. So the supplier is scoring, procurement is scoring, and the user is also scoring. The benefit of this tool for those in public sector, what it will happen, first of all, you bring yourselves around the table, which means there's normally this black hole where you don't know where the blame lies. Probably if it was a works and service and the people in the user did not hand over the site in good time. So it becomes a blame game that you can't point out a finger to. However, you can imagine when you're seated around the table and I say, organize for this the same way you'd organize for a normal evaluation. Because I know we normally set up evaluations and we sit down and we evaluate. So if you can structure your performance the same way, government is moving into a lot of contracting. We are on contract now, and performance contracting has now really established itself. So with this tool, you can actually take to task your procurement buyers so that they maintain, for example, they can commit to having a schedule, a plan, and saying we'll have so many, I intend to have so many supplier meetings, so many supplier evaluation meetings in a year. The magic of this tool is it might look like punitive, it looks like it wants to get people out, but when you put it to use, a lot of things happen. First of all, you might have been operating with an operations person. For example, for the leverage items, your copiers are on contract, but the toners are never there. And then there's this blame game, you guys didn't pay, and then you find yourself in a route that is not moving. However, when you have your quarterly meetings or depending on the criticality of the service, then you're able to find out where the issue is. This tool will bring you the decision makers on the table. If you've been using no offense to the credit controller, maybe it's the credit controller who is flexing their muscle, but then now you start having the CEOs and the real account managers coming on board to really hear where the issue is, such that it's a collaborative way of getting solutions. For example, you find a lot of issues are around documentation and accounting. Could be just how the documents are presented. Finance will tell you we are ready to pay. So like right now, there's a lot of talk of pending bills in the public sector, and it's quite an issue. But I'm sure those issues would have been managed if there was a supplier. One of the key issues would have been if there was a supplier performance rating tool. Now, if I may move to the law talks about, if I may move to the other procurement, the law talks about registration of suppliers. This is one of the very nice items that this law introduced. It means that previously public procurement, you need to be pre-qualified and listed for 2 years. So you wait for 2 years and then you get into the business. However, there's this registration of suppliers that has made it possible now that you can quickly get a registered list of suppliers from a portal, from the website. Anybody who walks in, he can give you a hard copy and you list them. And then you subject them to some evaluation. Of course, you must know if they meet some minimums. I mean, they must be a registered company, tax compliance, because by law, you must have met your tax obligations for me to do. And now, also in the event of preference and the preference category, this is the youth, women, and persons with disability. So the registration of suppliers, once you have that registered list, you see now it gives you a lot of flexibility in that I can get a database that is active very fast and apply the alternative procurement methods. Now, when I talk about procurement, I said in public, we are inclined to open tendering or restricted. However, there's an opportunity for us to use one method that is in law, the reverse auction method. The reverse auction method is in our Procurement Act. And there's even a procedure for the reverse auction. So this is another innovation that we really need to run and take advantage of. Remember, the registration of suppliers has been made very easy, and especially when you're looking at the items in the leverage category, because you already have a registered list. So you don't have an elaborate approval to get through. It's just get the registered list, have it valid, it's approved by the accounting officer, and you have a list. Then what stops you from doing reverse auction? If you've been to, let me say, what used to be classified as the Class A procuring entities in Kenya, right now, those entities have made some heavy investment in ERPs. And those ERPs, when you look at their design, they have these functionalities. So for those in public procurement in Kenya, you should be running for reverse auction because you already have a registered list of suppliers, and then you'll be able to get value for money, especially for these leverage items that are always running out, that you always need to get them. So you do not need that elaborate process of procurement. So there's a reverse auction method. You can imagine the law has already made a provision for it. The procuring entities have already invested in that infrastructure. So as professionals, we are just supposed to go and switch on the button and start using this reverse auction method. And it's very simple because at the submission deadline, because I know we have people from the public sector and private sector, you probably understand how this works. You can imagine the turnaround because the successful bid is the one that is at the deadline. So you already have your specifications and that's it. So this will bring in some efficiency in procurement. And remember, the framework is already been given. There's another whole section in the law about consultancy services that when I look at most of the adverts that go out, it seems to be limited to very complex and specialized procurements and maybe the ones that are funded. However, if we take our time, this is one avenue that I found. If you use the procurement of consultancy services as per the law, you are able to operate like a private entity. Because when you go the open tender, the law is very specific. It says the price has read out. So which means you're fixed in a straight jacket. You might not be able to really flex yourself. However, if you take your time and read section 10, the consultancy services, it gives you a lot of flexibility because there's a quality and cost-based selection. There's also the least cost selection. You select the lowest price. There's the consultant qualification selection. So you're looking at the qualifications of the consultant, which means you really need to get your specifications right. And then there's the individual consultant selection. There's even a fixed budget selection where you say, I have this much and I need you to, because a lot of procurements you find they fail because at the end of the day, you go through the whole full cycle and you find it's not within your budget. And by law, that requires a cancellation and it's provided for in law. So that is another avenue that if you're in public procurement in Kenya, try and design your sourcing and you'll get a holistic solution. For example, we do a lot of software and maintenance. We are missing the opportunity because we go to it like we are buying a good. So we miss the service aspect of it and we miss to select quality because we are going for the price. In the inventory control and asset management, as I'm summing up, the law has been very clear. It says you may use inventory management and control software. If you look at I hope the regulations will be gazetted. They are really inclined and really providing an environment for electronic procurement. Procuring entities as it is now, most of them have really invested a lot in ERP. So the issue of inventory management and control software is a whole world where we we can have an opportunity. What happens is mostly like you find the items that we buy, they are from the manufacturer. These the ones that come in, you find you find the production process is quite advanced. The component items with the RFID technology, with the barcoding and understanding where the component items are. However, you find when they arrive into our public entities, we have to break the bulk. You find an item is shipped and as a pallet, but because of not having or not optimizing the investment that we have to break the bulk. And you find we are still scanning. For example, you scan an individual item, yet this would have been received better and stored better. And even you have models like extended warehouse management, whereby warehousing, the person who's doing the warehousing and the forklift have an organized way of putting out and retrieving and putting out items into location, not depending on how they know, but depending on how best the technology is identifying which is the best storage location. There's a lot of stock differences. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of items that we miss to use them, and they become like I remember one of the big pharmaceutical distributor in Kenya, public entity, the issue of shelf life. Yet when you get into these entities, the investment is there. So the law has already given us an opportunity to automate, and we really need to take advantage as the people in charge of these procuring entities, just to realize and deliver value to the organization. I think that's my presentation for this session.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for your thoughts. I can see the questions are coming in. I think we will allow you to answer them after Alex and Chris has spoken. So Alex, the floor is yours. I know you talked about procurement in generalities and some of the aspects that you've seen from an innovation perspective. So we'll give you about 15 minutes because I can see we're running out of time. And then thereafter, Chris will come on board and then we can do the Q&A. So thank you, Andrew. And Alex, karibu sana.
Am I alive?
Yes, Alex, we can hear you. You can go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, the team, and thank you for choosing to participate. For the participants, my name is Alex Musungu. I have quite a bit of experience. Why I say it's a bit, because when it comes to procurement or supply chain matters, you learn every day. And you can only learn every day if you are practicing or you are in the battlefront. I have experience in both public sector, private sector. I've also worked on World Bank projects, African development. I've worked also in telcos. So it gives me an opportunity to share. So quickly, since we're running short of time, Ross, if you allow me, I'll want to share my screen and start off.
Yes, absolutely, Alex, go ahead.
Right, so personally, I was assigned the issue of looking at strategically innovating public procurement within the law. My colleague, Andrew, has opened up the act for you, the relevant areas. What I want to share with the team is that the public procurement law across the world is systematic, and it refers to standards throughout. That's why my colleague Andrew talked about the issue of standard bidding documents. So I will quickly look at the two objectives, then a brief intro, and then looking at best practice versus rules, because purposely, when you are working in public sector, you have to deliver value for money, but now we're looking at how innovative are you going to deliver value for money. There is the issue of Internet of Things. So that is where innovation has purely come from. And then there is also the issue of a risk of failure. That is what threatens any procurement person. The thought of going to miss the point and make a fail. A fail means that you don't deliver on the procurement. And if you don't deliver on the procurement, it means the company or the employer will miss the goods and services. So you will not have helped much. Briefly looking at what innovation is, you can see that you are looking at an improved product or service or a process. I know participants, we have guys from the manufacturing, we have those guys from the SME world, and we have the public sector, we have the medical. So basically, when you implement an innovation, you're looking at a process that gives you an improved product. Before the pandemic, we were doing things traditionally. That is, going through all rounds of paperwork, records, so be it. With the advent of the pandemic, and again, the Act allows for e-procurement. So your innovation, as I pick it out through the Internet of Things, it is captured in the law. So you are not drifting away from what the law requires you. Public procurement looks at state-owned or governments that are going to acquire goods or services. What is the role of a standard in a public procurement? Because we've had Andrew talk about standard bidding documents. The reason why public sector is structured using standards is to have a uniformity in delivery of goods and services that will fit the common person in any economy. Also, we want to use a standard so that we encourage participation by SME and the big boys and big girls during the tendering. And these standards are normally made to be simple. So how simple are they? It is the way you innovate around the standard bidding documents. An innovation that might be coming through and which we've put on the table as practitioners is translating standard bid documents in local dialects. That will assist, especially the SME. And I want to agree with you that that will boost the economy at that level. Also, there's the issue of demonstration of the role of public demand in driving innovation diffusion. Basically, this one drives the issue of supply management relationship. I know if you talk to a traditional procurement person, they will let you know that my company, my employer, does not allow interaction with suppliers. We've said no to that because for you to innovate, you must talk to your suppliers and always engage throughout, right from the thought of planning to procure to the delivery of the contract. There is the issue of contracts being terminated at your institution. Why? Is because sometimes we've worked mechanically, not referring to other people about what can be done and what cannot be done. Now, when you are strategically innovating the public procurement law, I'm thrown to the issue of threshold for exclusive preference. You can see that strategically, the government wants to boost innovation at both national and county level for Kenyans, that is, and for other participants from across the region. The government will always want to boost innovation at all levels. And the issue is ultimately improve productivity. And then you have inclusiveness. So when we talk of threshold for exclusive preference, means that you maintain such certain contracts to be participated by only those who have an exclusive preference. So for Kenya, we have the ACPO, access to government procurement opportunities. The budget that was read yesterday translates to 2.7 trillion, out of which purchases will contribute 1.8 trillion. So if this spend, we can innovatively set aside some for the marginalized, then it will go a long way. Why do you want to innovate? The world is becoming complex. I know there is a participant from KQ. We are keenly looking at how you are going to reopen the air travel at the airport. What we have recommended as professionals is that there is a whole length of checking people, checking same document here and there. Please, let's stop it. We will expect airports around the world that through the innovations, please, please, please use identity management system and or biometric system so that we avoid this issue of paperwork at the airport, checking documents left, right, and center. So once you use the identity management system, you are able to scan people through facial recognition, and basically you're looking at somebody's eyes. So also there's the global observation that we need to grow public sector through innovation, and you must change your practices, move away from traditional way of buying goods and services. Fast facts. What innovation has been coming through? Use of e-tendering allowed. Reverse auction, as Andrew has mentioned, it's a plus for us because after 5 hours of tendering, you are able to have a winner. Setting minimum periods for publishing tenders. If we are participating in tenders through e-tendering or e-procurement, you should appreciate that the minimum periods for publishing tenders will go down. Where we have an international tender being published for 7 days, and the response are very good. There's the use of competitive negotiations. In other procurement circles, they refer to it as negotiated procedure or competitive dialogue. Why we want this one to happen is that at times you want to procure goods through a faster means. You're now allowed for urgent needs to go through a competitive dialogue. That is what most of the hospitals are doing today, because we are not able to shuffle papers right and left. So take a phone, call whoever your supplier is, and send the other instructions via email or text, and you get your goods. That's how you have seen somebody say that at the Aga Khan University Hospital, they have PPPs and they have the reagents. So through a competitive negotiation or dialogue, you are able to have trust in your suppliers, and they will supply as fast as possible. How do we embed innovation in public procurement? Yes, it is there. Use of framework contracting. You don't need to be buying things every day, running around with requests for quotations. Have an elaborate system whereby you go through an open tender, but you are zeroing in on a framework contracting, whereby you have established unit rates, and those rates will be applicable for a year, because the law in the country allows us to vary contracts only after 12 months. We have policies, and these policies, the innovation coming through is that you need to transfer skills and technology to the citizens of this country, that's Kenya. Hence, if we have international suppliers, they will be required to ensure that they transfer skills and technology. Also, they will be required to offer employment opportunities. That's an innovation, because initially jobs have been exported and nothing has been consumed through use of local contents. Likewise, there's a legal framework, which is the Act, and the other laws applicable, the Constitution of Kenya, and we have guidelines and templates which you can use from time to time to facilitate your procurement. There is also the issue of professionalization. This we are quite keen. You can see House of Procurement giving you webinar, online trainings. It's a plus, it's an innovation, because for you to innovate, you need to have capacity, and the capacity is through networking, sharing, training, attending webinar or Zoom meetings. And out of the discussions, you get more to be knowledgeable. Also, there is the issue of appropriate e-procurement and information technology tools. And this tool is aimed at ensuring proper risk assessment to measure an impact on a contract. We have read in the media of how some companies, government entities, are forced to pay a price for terminating what? A contract. An innovation. Seek legal advice from a relevant person who is the gatekeeper, like the Attorney General, before you move to terminate. Otherwise, you bring costs, and the costs will wipe your revenues. So, looking at innovative procurement procedures, we're looking at ideas and solutions. This comes through infrastructure, because if you don't have infrastructure, then your Internet of Things will not work. A legal framework is in place. We have new markets which are now going to open up, and we have market dialogue, so that there are new suppliers coming through to participate in tendering. There is the issue of risk related to innovation in procurement. You are supposed to be risk averse. Otherwise, you may innovate and find that the innovation you brought on board has wiped you. So please be risk averse. So ensure that your operations, you scan, daily scan your operations, see where risks are likely to come up. By the way, to let you know, procurement is a risk-prone area. Whatever that happens, you must be very sure of how to mitigate the risks. Have clear terms and conditions on risk management in your contracts. Some of the contracts, the way are drafted, they are loose. We've heard of media reports of how we procure concession in this country where none of us are able to access a contract and see what was contained in. It only blows up when it comes to compensation, and the compensation are huge. So, in conclusion, I look at the Internet of Things as the driver for innovation in public procurement. It will sort out all the messes in acquisition of goods and services. We will be able to assist. Like now, when you are going about procurements, you require bid securities. On your phone, you have something called a QR code scanner. I'm sure those working in the banking sector now are introducing electronic bid securities. When they land on our desk, we don't want to start handling them because of this issue of pandemic. So we also use our phones to scan the security, and you will get whether it is valid or not valid. That goes quite handy. And then finally, not to leave out the SME. The law is also allowing us to go through community participation, allow people at the community level to participate in public procurement. And if they participate, let them prepare their quotations or tenders in the language they know best. So you must also have translated your documents in the local language. That's an innovation, and it can boost the acquisition of goods and services, and you find that the economy will be growing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, for your thoughts. Very insightful. I like the Internet of Things and the innovation around that. So Chris, perhaps we'll just give you about 5 minutes to share your thoughts and sort of, wrap up the thoughts that both Alex and Andrew have given, and then we can move on to the question and answer session. So Chris, karibu sana. Chris, can you hear us?
I think he's muted.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Chris.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening, Chris.
Okay, my name is Chris Wasike. I work with Ben, and I thought because there was Andrew, then Alex, and then I thought the next person would be Ben, going by alphabetical order. But that's okay. Mine will be general. I'm a student of simple things, so that then I can understand the complex. So as my colleagues Andrew and Alex have said, to innovate is basically to do something new, to use a new method, or have a new idea, product, and all that. And this is critical. So generally speaking, it doesn't matter whether you're in the private sector or public sector. Automation is possible. In fact, WTO has been talking about e-commerce for the last over 40 years. ERPs have been around from the late 90s in Kenya. And these were meant to integrate the processes within organizations and even without organizations. And so this is to say that as procurement professionals, we should not allow ourselves to be tied down to manual ways of doing things, just to imagine that it's not possible. Of course it is possible. Andrew spoke about reverse auction, and one thing I think he forgot to say is that particular method of procurement is supposed to be facilitated by PPRA, by PPRA coming up with a secure portal for that to happen. And so that is possible and it should be done. So PPRA should come in as an enabler for this kind of innovation and automation. But just to give you the good news and the bad news is that the good news is that we can do it. The bad news is that now going forward, we might end up with people like data managers, procurement, who will be basically techno-savvy guys who will end up analyzing and organizing procurement data just to make sure that we can then make good decisions from that data. Just to bring you up to speed, Crown agents came up with a request for quotation, the big book that we were all used to in the 90s and back in the day, in 1958. It's only until 1998 that we converted that RFQ into a soft copy and then started emailing quotations. But the requirement was that when responding, you then bring it back manually. But with the current levels of automation, I don't believe personally that people should be walking around with documents. My small bank, called Family Bank, was paperless from early 2000s. The government of Kenya does business with the private sector. So there is no reason why private sector should automate and government should remain behind. And so for me, for procurement to remain relevant and to add value to organizations, we are going to have to upscale our skills to include proper data training so that then we manage this data properly so that we bring value to our organizations. Look at it this way. If a rose flower produced at Maridadi farm in Naivasha can be traced to Naivasha in Netherlands from the time it was planted, the chemicals that were applied, the period it was airlifted, and the period it landed, we have no reason why we cannot have procurement processes that are end-to-end, automated end-to-end. This is something that must be done, needs to be done, so that then we can all talk about bringing value to organizations. Secondly, automation brings a lot of visibility in the processes. And so that helps us then to manage our processes in a more efficient and effective way. Looking at things like contract management, supplier management and all these are aspects that can be automated. So that then you have a dashboard that flickers on your computer when a guy delays supplies or deliveries, when a guy delivers things that you have rejected, when a project is running out of time and things like that. So these are things that can be automated, and many people in the organization and outside can also see those where we are at any given time. So we have to run away from this aspect of believing that to touch it is to believe it. What will happen if all trees disappear in the whole world? Will procurement remain around and looking at papers? Will we be known for the ignominy of destroying forests? We must engage in green procurement. Green procurement means you're automating more, and so you're cutting less trees. So in summary, I would say, let us avoid the cavalier attitude about automation and do it. Let us think and imagine without the box, because I know most of us are used to the box. The box in this instance is the paper, and it doesn't add any value to our process at all. Let us think new without overemphasis on rear view mirror, lest we crash. Let us stop being abstract and innovate and stop throwing obstacles in our processes. because it is possible. In fact, the minister, the cabinet secretary for finance, the CS National Treasury, said the government is in the process of introducing an procurement process that or application that is end-to-end. So we must style up and actually start embracing and appreciating these things. Otherwise, we'll be wiped out of the earth as procurement people if we remain irrelevant in as far as automation is concerned. So lastly, let us stop discussing whether to innovate or not and just do it, lest we become like Musalia and Oweta discussing the merger of ANC and Ford Kenya, eternally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. I knew politics would come in somewhere with you in the house, so thank you for that.
Thank
you.
We
have a few questions from the participants. And this one, I think I want to direct to Andrew. How do you conduct due diligence process before onboarding a supplier? What are some of the tools that you can use to run due diligence processes? This is from Chantal. So I'll give that to Andrew.
Chantal.
Andrew, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, fine.
Okay, that's fine.
It's very interesting because I know there's a due diligence like in the private sector. Some of the issues you can do is before you onboard the supplier, and these are the innovations that you're saying you are coming in. The procuring entities need to, that's the public procuring entities, they might need to look at the structure, like mostly you find is procurement, logistics, departments, maybe there's quality there, but you can have, for example, now with these people with a wealth of experience, just have an expert pool of a section that will bring in some operation excellence. That will be like a stakeholder relations part of supply chain. So in public sector, talking from experience, we had issues in terms of how some equipments were being used by the engineers. So there's a framework where we do factory inspections, but remember this is prior to procuring. There are many experts out there who look at your procuring entity and they can see the challenges that you are having. How do you onboard them? If I come to the supply chain person in procurement, he'll tell you, wait for it to come into my procurement plan and then I'll tender for it. But see, if you define this section that does research for you, and remember the law allows us to do market analysis, market survey, it's in the law. So have this section that will be like, is actually a stakeholder relationships department. So to answer your question, you do an FI, factory inspection, try to find out who is the OEM. And when you send out like a proof of concept, the terms and conditions must be very clear in terms of the signing of the NDAs and which costs lie where in terms of now if there'll be some travel and accommodation costs. And it's amazing, like when we experimented with one of them, we came to realize the issue of how these engineering aspect was being done. You see, the query was, supply chain, you're buying the wrong items. And the technical team says, no, we must buy this specific brand because it works for us. So we organized for this session, we brought in the manufacturer, and remember, not even the dealers, we brought in the manufacturer because he has a performance record globally. And he walks in and we sit down the engineers. You see, now this is the kind of the innovation you need to put in supply chain. So we brought them together and we were able to identify, surprisingly, some of the issue was how somebody was taught how to do that function. So you see, they've been handing over the wrong way of doing this item and procurement was always getting the backlash. So we do a lot of factory inspections. You just go inspect. We have a stakeholder relationship kind of office where it's called regional and business partnering. So anybody can walk in and he's not going to procurement and he's not going to stores. So he's coming to tell us his story. then we identify who are the stakeholders, and then we talk about the solution that is there. We are looking at, there's an issue with the asset management. So we are looking for an asset management solution. Of course, reflexively, you'd want to just put a tender outside there and say, we need an asset management solution. But do you understand your needs? So through these unit, we are able to have 3 functions. And now we have good search engines, for example, what is it called? The ones for IT. So you are the foresters and all those research engines. So you can see which are the leading solutions. And then you invite the local representatives, make a presentation, buy in all these stakeholders so that everybody has an idea and you understand their different needs. That's the kind of innovation that you can have. I hope I've answered you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Can
Yes.
I chime in just a bit?
Sure.
Rose, this thing called due diligence is the elephant in the room, eh?
Mm.
And people are being taken in for failing to do basic things. Eh?
Mm-hmm.
In my view, we have ignored something called expression of interest process. You use that process, you kick out the joyriders. You only have 5-7 people who qualify. So once you give them the real tender, everybody qualifies.
I totally agree, and that's one of the methods I said we totally have left out: procurement of consultancy services. That starts from an expression of interest, and that's how you get quality, and it gives you good flexibility. I totally agree with the panelists.
Okay. So Chris, because you had the platform, perhaps you can respond to this one. It's from Patricia, and she says, as part of the presentation, there was a mention around selection on the lowest price. Aren't there other factors in public sector procurement other than price that we should be looking at as professionals? Perhaps your thoughts, Chris?
Price is key under RFQ because the items are known, the market is known, the descriptions are known, the specifications are known, the quality is known. So price is key in RFQ. But once you go open tender, there are other things, technical qualifications, the financial standing of the bidder, the understanding of the subject matter, things like that. Then you end up with those different selection methods then. Whether you consider quality first to price, you consider technical first to price and all that. That's why we end up with a combination of the 2 scores, many times finance and technical. Whoever scores highest gets to win. They don't have to have quoted a shilling. They could have quoted 10 shillings, but they offer the best value for money. So the infatuation with the price is misunderstood and misleading. And once upon a time, I told ESCC not to be going around saying that you bought from the second highest. You'll never have a conviction. And they took me seriously. They have stopped chasing people around town for giving people tenders on second or third highest.
Alex, a question for you. Request for this is from Austin. Request for proposal as mentioned as a method of procurement has only been mentioned under Part 10 of the Act dealing with consultancy services. Does this mean that public procurement RFP is only allowed while procuring for consultancy services, or was this an error? Your thoughts?
Thank you, Rose, for that. No, it is not an error. If you look at the Procurement Act, when you are considering methods of procurement, there is the first part which covers goods, works, and non-consulting services. When you talk of non-consulting services, those are routine services. But when you go to the second part, it talks of procurement of consulting services. Those are of intellectual property rights. So hence, it is not an omission, neither is it an error. Quite well put that when you are procuring consulting services, if you are very sure that you have clear TORs, terms of reference, then start at RFP. Where you have no clear terms of reference, you are advised to start at expression of interest. It gives you a leeway to get scoping of the market, the respondents, and evaluate them. And sometimes you may pick ideas from the EOI. And now you develop your detailed terms of reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for that. Andrew, perhaps you could respond to this question in two parts. Does PPRA website have a list of debarred or blacklisted suppliers? And where can we get that? And then while you touch on that, talk about extension of contracts. Hi, Andrew, are you online?
Unmute.
Yeah, for the debarment, I would want Alex to help me on that one. Because I've gone on their website, I'm not seeing what I was presenting was this would be a nice process to start the process of debarment, because debarment is not, the implication is big. Alex, just help me on that one.
All right, I'll take on the debarment. We are Kenyans, and sorry to say so for those from the other countries around the world who are participating in the webinar. As Kenyans, we do inside trading, and I want to be very clear on that. Somehow, our procurement professionals know the firms who are bidding, somehow related in one way or another. And we have bad breed of procurement guys who solicit for favors. Now, the onus is on the procuring entity, the buyer. If you realize that in a procurement, somebody has broken the law, you're supposed to initiate the bar. And it is a rigorous process, as Andrew puts it, because it is a full investigation. And the investigation will be conducted back to back. Whatever that was submitted will be verified. So in that crossfire, sometimes it might hound some of us out of the office. Hence, when somebody declines to sign a contract, all we do is we cancel the contract and keep quiet. You've not done good for us. So how we can go about this, like what other multi vendors, all these guys, what they are doing, that if you commit an offense under the procuring process, then initiate an investigation, let it end up by either saying that you are clean or you are not clean. And if you are not clean, you should be debarred and you should not participate in any public procurement. The catch is that we don't report. Hence, the regulator has nothing to post. Though we know there are bad contractors, there are bad suppliers in the economy. Bad for us. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew, your thoughts on tender extensions in public procurement?
Is it tender or?
Contract
extension.
There's also another one on tender extension, so maybe just touch on both.
So the contract, I will handle the contracts. The beauty about the PPAD Act, it's very clear. So if you had the Act with you, that is if you are a practitioner in public, there's a section 139 that clearly talks about amendments and variations to contract. And it's very, very clear. It says the amendment has to be approved by the awarding authority. So actually there's the aspect of during the contract, you know, when there's a contract is live, you find sometimes the project manager and the contractor make some decisions. So at some point I've seen some contracts that are in conflict with the act because the drafting of the contract gives the powers to the PMO. However, the law is very clear in section 139. It talks about must be approved. And it also talks about the reason why I'm just touching on it, because I cannot interpret the law. You just have to read it as it is. There's an extension of the contract period. Use if you need to use your prime costs, contingencies, reimbursable costs. That's the variation of contract. And then there's also the variation in terms of the price variation in terms of goods, services, works and services, 20% from the original contract quantity. And if it's combined goods, works and services, 25%. So this is a very objective pronouncement in the contract. However, in the law, and there's one aspect about the law, it says you cannot vary a contract within 12 months. So that I would want to ask my seniors, what happens if my contract is 6 months? What happens in this case? So you see, it's protected. You cannot vary a contract within 12 until after 12 months. That's the reading of the law. So I would encourage once practitioners just to read in section 130, it's 139, goes all the way. It is very, very clear. I hope that that addresses it. Alex, you can talk about the tender.
Extension.
And also I'll post a question to you.
All right. Thank you for the tender extension. I believe that the participant is asking about extension of opening or submission. If we refer to the law, it tells you that you must always let the tenderers know up to what time they can put across their clarifications. A clarification may come in terms of, we wish this tender to be extended by 14 days. And they must justify why that period, because some of our procurements are time-first, that it must be delivered within a specific period. So yes, the law allows for extension, that is opening, but it should be through an addendum. If a third of the time is remaining, kindly extend. What I will not advise is for you as the practitioner to extend a tender opening when it is remaining 1 day. It is a disaster because already some bidders have already submitted. But if you extend today, what happens to my bid? You might want to have gone to the tender box, tried to fidget with it. So please ensure you state clearly that clarifications will be accepted before 7 days to closing. That enables you to react. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew and Alex. This one goes to Chris from Amos. Once you have set out the specs, quantity, quality, etc., and you have an apple for an apple with regards to suppliers, I'm struggling to understand why you should award a second or third supplier instead of the supplier giving the best price.
Thanks, Rose. There's no justification if you're comparing apple for apple. And I think I qualified my my assertion about going to the second or lowest, or second highest or second lowest, I don't know how you look at it, by saying that for requests for quotations, the market is known, the specifications are known, the market, prices are known. In fact, in my view, to go back to the market and do a market survey for RFQ related procurements is a waste of time. So if you are comparing for Apple, the price is king. If you are comparing strength of financial strength of bidders and the experience in a specific field, then quality is king. That's the difference, really.
Okay. There's an interesting one here from Ken. I think he's asking the panel to look to the future. And with regards to COVID-19 pandemic, what's the next best innovation that replaces it? So I'm not sure whether he's asking about the virus or, but I imagine he's looking at it from a procurement perspective. So, Alex, you talked about Internet of Things. So
Right.
while you answer that, you can also look at or respond to the question around, is public sector ready for the Internet of Things, and what we need to do to be ready?
Right. So let me start with the softer part. Is the public sector ready? Partially, we are ready. I won't say we are, because as a country, we don't have the right infrastructure. If you have to go through e-procurement, it means you must have steady internet. And you must have right laws guarding against cybercrime. Otherwise, it becomes a tough scenario. So COVID has really shaped things, but not yet there. I stand to be guided, but I know infrastructure-wise, we are not yet ready. The cost of internet in the country is quite high. Safaricom, you can see when they post their records, superb, billions. Can they make the cost of data to be cheap? That will boost us. Internet of Things innovation. It is the way to go. Just to bring in the other issue of blockchain and the e-coins. You've heard of the e-coins? That is what
The Internet of Things. The Internet of Things has happened. That's it.
leave the issue of paperwork.
Looks like it.
Into a contract.
Okay.
You are allowed to enter into a contract using the e-signature. This was not the thing before, and I'm sure that's the way we are moving, that we move things and do them online. So steady internet, infrastructure, people understanding, and then we fight cybercrime. That will deliver us.
Okay.
But also,
if I may just also add, I totally agree with what Alex is saying. The framework is there. When you look at the draft regulations, we are coming in with the electronic signatures. There's something he really brought in that was very critical. The issue of PBs, performance bonds, now are coming in electronically. And as I said, most of the procuring entities, what they've invested in, those ERPs they have a provision for receiving these documents. There's a collaboration whereby invoice will be submitted online. The other thing, as he mentioned, I was excited when he said we are going towards that direction. I don't know if how many of us, especially those in public sector, have gone to the public procurement information portal. There's a PPIP portal. It's called tenders.go.ke. When you go there, so far, you should be having some visibility. And remember, this is anchored in law, and it is required of the regulator to establish the procurement portal, so that, and you remember, when now this information is on the portal, then models can be done and decisions can be made. And when you look at the portal as it is in the back end, there's a lot of integration with the with the revenue authority, integration with the register of companies, and there's a lot of information over there. So I was excited when you said we are baby steps going towards that. Thank you.
Just a quick one. Rose.
Yes, go ahead.
A quick one. My concern is the pre-award steps, because that's where there's a lot of paperwork. For instance, we have these standard tender documents that we dish out to bidders, and we ask them to return those very documents, even for pages that are unnecessary. And yet they can just scan the areas that are signed and maybe do a letter to say that we have understood the whole thing, to cover for these other 200 pages that mean nothing except for contract management. So these things can be scanned, they can be digitized and sent back, and in a secured portal, both secured and secure, so that then they are opened. That portal is opened at the time the tenders are due for opening. Those basic steps are the most important ones. Post-award is something that we can always be managed somehow.
Oh, okay. I can see Masi Munyari, your hand is up. You can go ahead and ask your questions and mute yourself. Masi, can you hear me? Go ahead, Masi. I can see you've unmuted yourself. Okay, looks like she's offline, so we can take a few more questions. Do you undertake an assessment to determine the financial capability of a supplier? And at what stage do you undertake the financial assessments in public procurement? Can I give this to Alex? Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Yes, you're saying something?
Yes, there's a question here around undertaking an assessment of the financial capability of a supplier. Yes. At what point do you do that?
Okay. Thank you. Normally, assessment of capability of the supplier is twofold. You may want to do it at the tail end, that's pre-award, but we advise that you do it during the technical evaluation. While you are looking at assessment of the capability, financial, it is to give you the strength or the hope that if the supplier is awarded a contract, he is able to deliver as per the specified delivery times in the contract, and they are also able to meet their other financial needs. So the issue of running into insolvency should be guarded. If somebody is heavily in court, most of their monies are being spent on court fines or doing other things, and hence it leaves no financial strength to support your contract to be delivered on time.
Okay.
In addition, just a small one.
Yeah.
My experience, colleagues, is that we very religiously put there the requirement for audited accounts, bank statements, and all that. But if you look at evaluation reports, there is rarely a report on those financials. Nobody gives a report to say this guy's gearing ratio is bogus, we cannot go there. We just take those attachments at face value, which is, to me, it doesn't make sense.
Okay. I can see Mercy is now online. Mercy, would you like to ask your question? Okay. So perhaps we'll take the last question before we can wrap up. And we have a question from Jack Gumbo, who says, can I renew a medical cover with a new, can I renew medical cover with new service additions. For example, if the old contract allowed outpatient cover of 300,000, upon renewal, can I enhance it to 350, for instance? The resulting price increase is within 15 to 25%, or should I open it up to other bidders? So Andrew, would you like to take this?
Andrew, you want to take it on?
Okay, you can go ahead because it's just the same variation, Alex.
Yes. I see that the participant has a contract for 1 year, which is 300,000, isn't it? Now he wants to renew. Remember when Andrew talked about contract variation or amendment, he gave you specifics that if you have to vary a contract, then you have to go within the prescribed limits. For goods and services, it is a quantity of up to 15%. For works, it is 20%. And for cumulative contract price is up to 25%. Now, the scenario here is that if you choose to renew and go to 350, you have renewed 100% plus. So it is illegal. Contracts for insurance are annual, and hence the advice is that they should be tendered for annually. The change in scope is quite material because you might be pushing the medical cover from maybe inpatient 1 million to 4 million. That's quite material. So it calls for you to open up and tender it afresh. That's my thought.
But also, just another way of looking at it.
Yes, go on.
Yes, go on.
Just another way of looking at it, Alex. Assuming you have entered into a medical insurance cover of 300 members of staff, and you employ 5 new people in the course of the year, you only vary the quantities of the 5, and that is in order, isn't it?
Yes, they are added on pro rata. Pro rata means that paying when you join, and it is allowed under the insurance for medical on pro rata only.
Pro rata basis, yes.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so quite an engaging conversation. I can see the ladies have put up the placards wondering where the lady facilitators are. We were to have Dr. Apopa, but unfortunately she got held up, so she couldn't make it.
I'm the lady here. You can call me.
We haven't seen your dress yet, Chris, so I'm still looking forward to seeing how you're dressed tonight. So we will have the lady facilitators in the upcoming webinars. So allow me to thank Andrew, Chris, and Alex for sharing your thoughts and insights. I can see Ben has a burning question, so I'll invite him to ask his question as well as give his final remarks before we can end the session. So karibu, Ben.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Chris. I have a question for all of you. The question is, as I was typing it down, what kind of spend analytics does public procurement managers, do they compare performance year on year on what they spent this year versus last year, or what they spent versus plan? Do they compare it versus the best in market? Do they do benchmarkings with peers, locally, regionally, and even internationally? Have procurement managers and head of procurement in this benchmarking with peers taken the initiative even to connect with them on LinkedIn as to compare doing? Because some of these vendors work in Dubai, work somewhere in Uganda, they do the same project in Angola for the same energy company or healthcare company in the public sector. So I just want to know, how do you compare your spend versus how you money and best practice versus best practice?
Okay, if I may just respond from experience, what has happened is you come to realize that a lot of public entities came from the background where they were buying, as in they would buy and say it's public money, but you realize right now the public that you are buying for is really asking for accountability. So which means there's this aspect of now we have to transition and bring in this aspect of best practice into these procuring entities. You find now like aspects of category management are coming in. So far, you might find people are just saying, I'm a category buyer of this, category buyer of this. But when you take them to task and say, how much is your spend? They're not able to put down their spend because they're still transactional, as in the plan is out, it's time to run. But now as procuring entities, remember I've said, as the seniors in the organization are signing performance contracts, which means we are signing service charters with the general public. We are committing, we need to provide these. When you do this, we'll provide in a certain period. So when you look at the upstream activities, then it calls to supply chain becoming more responsive, which means this aspect of spend management has to be there. The aspect of monitoring how your procurement plan is performing has to come in. But there's a lot of capacity building that needs to come in so that now the teams and the people are able to get to this level that you are talking about. And remember, it's a transition. It's a big ship that has to, you'll turn, but it will turn slowly, but it's turning. And then it's an opportunity to actually have the private sector people come in and give this best practice. And slowly we're embracing, and I'm sure we'll now be starting to become more strategic buyers rather than transactional and operational buyers. That's my comment.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Yes, mine will, I will first look at the spend analysis in public sector. That is something that is missing, and I'm sure participants will agree with me. But with the advent of performance contracting being enforced, guys are now getting on top of the spend that they are incurring. And in our reports, because our procurement law requires that the head of procurement must submit a monthly report. So you are supposed to prepare an analysis of what you spent on what. Was it value? Was it within the prevailing market prices? And that gives an idea of if we were to procure similar goods elsewhere the following year, how much are we going to plan for? In private sector, I once worked in a private sector. The spend analysis is normally versus a year ago. So when we talk of the spend in in June this year, it is being rated against a year ago. But as things unfold, everybody will get it wrong this year because of the pandemic. So things are changing and we need to be flexible and agile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for always attending our webinars. We hope that you find something relevant, applicable, and impactful in your places of work and in your business, and just in the general knowledge of knowing that the expenditure in your business goes through procurement, and it's an alarming thing that people don't look at where they spend their money to or through. Key, even when you're a profit organization, profit is equal to revenue minus cost, and the cost managers, the people who are your gatekeepers, are the procurement professionals. It is very key that we do things like spend analysis, because you cannot measure what you don't know. I asked the question of linking with their colleagues regionally, linking with people internationally, maybe through LinkedIn. This is because if you are constructing a road and is a Chinese supplier, he also constructed that road potentially somewhere in Sri Lanka. And if you had those connections that have been made possible now, your reference is very easy, because if you're asking, show me your last 10 purchase orders, we should be able to give you an average price on what these people charge, unless our, say, topography is very different. So these are the kind of things that we should have on our fingertips. Things that are standard, things that we know we will do year on year. If you're an organization doing a similar thing, similar business, you know next year you will still do the same business unless you innovate or expand. You should have on your fingertips the best suppliers in those categories. What else is happening somewhere else? Because that is our duty. Otherwise, procurement people, we just sit on the desk and Facebook, because once you buy, once you contract, what else do you do? But it's our duty to know the market, know the price, manage our spend. And one of the easiest things to save is market intelligence. Just look on the left, you'll discover the same thing you're buying is being sold 30% somewhere else. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for participating. Next week, we have a discussion of cash. Cash has been a challenge now, and cash has never been taken so seriously with procurement people. But inventory, capex are idle cash, supplier payments on both sides are cash to conserve and generate. Next week, join us on the 18th, Thursday, 6 p.m. similar time, to discuss cost is key, but cash is king. And let's go back to our workplaces and release cash, generate cash, and conserve cash. Thank you. Have a good night, and God bless you all.
Thank you too.
Thank you.